In the grim darkness of the far future, there exists a secret so devastating, so fundamentally earth-shattering, that it could topple the very foundations of the Imperium of Man itself. For 10,000 years, the servants of the Golden Throne have guarded this knowledge with their lives, ensuring that not even the highest ranks of the Adeptus Terra would dare speak its name. Yet today, we delve into the forbidden archives, past the sealed vaults and encrypted data cores, to uncover the truth they never wanted you to discover. What if everything you thought you knew about the God Emperor of mankind was built upon the most elaborate deception in galactic history? What if the very being worshipped by trillions across 1,000,000 worlds harbored origins so dark, so twisted, that even the Chaos Gods themselves would recoil in recognition? This is not merely another tale of heresy or corruption. This is the revelation that could redefine humanity's understanding of its own salvation. The Imperium teaches us that the Emperor is eternal, divine, a beacon of purity in an ocean of darkness. Yet beneath the golden facade lies something far more complex, far more terrifying than any demon prince or Xanos overlord. The truth is that the master of mankind carries within his immortal form the collected sins and secrets of 50,000 years of manipulation, deception, and unthinkable bargains struck in the deepest shadows of the galaxy. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to learn will challenge every fundamental belief you hold about the defenders of humanity. This secret has been buried beneath layers of propaganda, hidden behind walls of psychic conditioning, and protected by the most fanatical guardians the galaxy has ever known. Even now, as these words reach your ears, there are those who would silence this truth forever. But the time for silence has passed. The veil must be lifted, and the Emperor's greatest secret must finally see the light of day. Long before the golden age of the Great Crusade, before the thunder of bolter fire echoed across the stars, there existed a time when the being we know as the Emperor walked among us not as a god, but as something far more mortal, far more vulnerable. In the ancient mists of prehistory, during the 8th millennium before the Common Era, in the harsh lands of central Anatolia, something unprecedented occurred that would reshape the destiny of our entire species. The shamans of humanity's scattered tribes possessed a terrible foresight. These primitive psychers, the first of their kind to pierce the veil between reality and the immaterium, witnessed visions that chilled them to their very souls. They saw the birth of entities in the warp, malevolent consciousness that would one day become the 4 great powers of chaos. They understood with crystal clarity that humanity stood on the precipice of eternal damnation, that their species would inevitably fall prey to these growing psychic predators unless drastic action was taken. What followed was perhaps the most momentous decision in human history, yet it remains unknown to all but the most secretive circles within the Imperium. These shamans, guardians of humanity's spiritual essence, made the ultimate sacrifice. In a ritual of unimaginable scope and consequence, they gathered in one place and committed mass suicide, pooling their combined psychic energies into a single vessel. From their collective death was born the being who would one day rule the galaxy. But this origin story reveals a truth that would shake the very foundations of imperial doctrine. The Emperor is not a natural-born god, not some divine miracle granted by the grace of Providence. He is a construct, a weapon forged from the willing sacrifice of thousands of human souls, created with the singular purpose of protecting humanity from the predations of chaos. This revelation alone would be enough to spark civil wars across the Imperium, for it challenges the entire theological framework upon which the imperial cult is built. But the deception runs far deeper than even this shocking origin suggests. For nearly 50 millennia, this composite being walked among humanity not as its revealed savior, but as a shadow manipulating the course of history from behind the scenes. Every great conquest, every technological breakthrough, every pivotal moment in human development bears his hidden fingerprints. The Emperor did not simply emerge during the Age of Strife to save humanity from itself. He had been orchestrating human evolution and advancement for tens of thousands of years, a puppet master pulling strings across the entire span of recorded history. Consider the implications of this revelation. When you read of Alexander the Great's conquests, you may in fact be reading of the Emperor's own campaigns. When you study the rise and fall of great civilizations, you witness the careful cultivation of human potential by an immortal being working toward goals that span millennia. Every war, every peace, every moment of progress or regression served his greater design, a design that even now remains shrouded in mystery. The Emperor assumed countless identities throughout this hidden age, sometimes male, sometimes female, always adapting to serve his purposes. He was the brutal conqueror when humanity needed direction through strength, the meek inheritor when subtlety served better than force. Historical records speak of figures who shaped the course of nations and empires, yet how many of these legendary individuals were in fact the same immortal entity wearing different faces across the centuries? This systematic manipulation of human development raises profound questions about free will and destiny. Did humanity ever truly evolve independently? Or has every step of our species' journey been carefully orchestrated by this singular consciousness? The very notion of human achievement becomes suspect when viewed through this lens. For what accomplishment can truly be called our own when guided by such an ancient and persistent hand? Yet even this revelation pales in comparison to what the Emperor discovered during humanity's dark age of technology. Ancient records, sealed within the deepest vaults of the imperial palace, speak of a journey to a world called Molech, a planet that would become the site of the Emperor's most controversial and hidden act. Accompanied by other perpetuals, beings like himself who had transcended mortal limitations, the Emperor traveled to this distant world, and there made a discovery that would forever alter the balance of power in the galaxy. On Molech, they found something that should not have existed, a gateway into the realm, a portal of chaos itself, that led directly into the domain of the dark gods. What happened next represents perhaps the most damning secret in the Emperor's long history, a truth so explosive that it has remained buried for over 10,000 years, known only to a handful of the most trusted servants of the throne. The Emperor entered that portal, descended into the very heart of chaos, and there, in the presence of the four great powers themselves, he forged a bargain that would grant him godlike abilities and the knowledge necessary to create the Primarchs. This is no mere speculation or heretical whisper, but a truth confirmed by none other than Horus himself, the war master who once stood at the Emperor's right hand, and who learned of this terrible secret during his own fall to chaos. Think carefully about what this means. The Emperor, humanity's supposed savior and protector, achieved his greatest powers not through divine grace or natural evolution, but through a deal struck with the very entities he claims to oppose. The Primarchs, those demigod warriors who would lead humanity's greatest crusade, owe their existence to knowledge gained through collaboration with chaos itself. Every victory of the Great Crusade, every world brought into compliance, every triumph of the imperial war machine stems from power that was purchased with a bargain made in the realm of damnation. The irony is staggering in its scope. The master of mankind, who would later preach the imperial truth and denounce religion and superstition as humanity's greatest weaknesses, had himself trafficked with powers beyond mortal comprehension to achieve his goals. The being who would demand absolute loyalty and purity from his sons and servants had compromised with the ultimate corruption to gain strength necessary for his grand design. Some scholars and theorists suggest that perhaps the Emperor outsmarted the Chaos Gods, that his bargain was somehow a deception that allowed him to gain power while giving nothing meaningful in return. Yet this interpretation rings hollow when we consider the subsequent course of history. If the Emperor truly gained the upper hand in his negotiations with Chaos, why did the Horus Heresy succeed in crippling his plans? Why did half of his Primarchs fall to the very powers he claims to have outwitted? The evidence suggests that whatever bargain was struck on Moloch, it came with a price that continues to be paid to this very day. The true name of the Emperor remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in the galaxy, and with good reason. Names hold power in the Immaterium, and the revelation of his original identity could potentially expose him to attacks from his enemies or reveal connections to historical figures that would undermine the carefully constructed mythology of his divine nature. Ancient texts suggest that in his earliest incarnation, shortly after his creation from the sacrifice of the shamans, he bore the name Neoth, a designation that speaks to origins far more humble and mortal than the golden god of imperial propaganda. Yet even this name may be merely another mask, another identity assumed for a specific purpose, before being discarded when it no longer served his goals. The Emperor's true nature remains as elusive as ever, a composite being wearing the faces of history's greatest figures, while pursuing goals that span not merely centuries, but entire ages of human development. The imperial truth itself, the great doctrine that would replace religion and superstition with reason and scientific understanding, was built upon what may be the greatest lie ever told. The Emperor, who possessed intimate knowledge of chaos and the warp, who had personally negotiated with demon princes and witnessed the birth of dark gods, deliberately concealed this knowledge from humanity while claiming to champion truth and enlightenment over ignorance and faith. This calculated deception served multiple purposes, clearing the field of competing beliefs and religious systems while positioning the Emperor as the sole source of truth and guidance. Yet the suppression of knowledge about chaos and the warp left humanity dangerously unprepared for the supernatural threats they would inevitably face, contributing directly to the catastrophic events of the Horus Heresy when these hidden truths finally came to light. The hypocrisy runs deeper still when we examine the Emperor's treatment of his own sons. While preaching the dangers of superstition and the corruption of religious thought, he simultaneously engaged in the most profound acts of sorcery and psychic manipulation imaginable. The creation of the Primarchs themselves required knowledge that could only be described as demonic in nature, yet he condemned any of his sons who sought to explore similar paths of power. Magnus the Red, perhaps the most gifted psyker among the Primarchs, was punished severely for delving into forbidden knowledge, yet his transgression pales in comparison to his father's own trafficking with chaos. The Emperor's rage at Magnus was not born from righteous indignation, but from the fear that his son might uncover the very same secrets that had granted him his godlike status. Every rebuke, every punishment, every moment of imperial disapproval served to protect the Emperor's greatest vulnerability, the truth of his own corruption. Consider the broader implications of this systematic deception. The Space Marine legions, those angels of death who conquered the galaxy in humanity's name, were created using knowledge purchased from the very enemies they would be sent to destroy. Every bolt or round fired in the Emperor's name, every world brought into compliance, every act of heroism and sacrifice performed by the Astartes stemmed from a foundation built upon the darkest possible compromise. The Webway project represents yet another layer of the Emperor's elaborate deceptions, a scheme so ambitious and so secretive that even his most trusted sons remained ignorant of its true purpose. While the official explanation claims that the Emperor sought to free humanity from its dependence on warp travel and the Navigator Guilds, the reality suggests motives far more complex and potentially sinister. Oh, the Emperor claimed that by severing humanity's connection to the warp, he could deny the Chaos Gods their source of power and guide humanity toward its next evolutionary stage. Yet this explanation fails to address the fundamental contradiction at the heart of his plan. If the Emperor truly sought to eliminate humanity's psychic connection to the Immaterium, what would become of his own power that he had gained through direct communion with the warp's most dangerous inhabitants? The level of secrecy surrounding the Webway project extended beyond mere strategic concerns. Even the Custodian Guard, the Emperor's most loyal and trusted servants, fought and died in the Webway tunnels without understanding why they were there or what they were protecting. This deliberate compartmentalization of information suggests that the Emperor feared what might happen if the true scope of his ambitions became known, even to those who had sworn absolute loyalty to his cause. Perhaps most troubling of all is the Emperor's explanation for this secrecy. He claimed to fear an uprising from the Navigator Guilds, whose power and influence would be eliminated by humanity's transition to Webway travel. Yet this justification crumbles under scrutiny. Why would the Primarchs, beings created specifically to serve the Emperor's will, need to be kept ignorant of his plans? Why would the Custodians, who had already proven their absolute loyalty through millennia of service, be denied knowledge of their purpose? The answer may lie in the true nature of the Webway project itself. Rather than a means of freeing humanity from chaos, the project, to date the Emperor's own, may have been designed to console power by creating a network through which his influence could extend directly into the minds and souls of every human being in the galaxy. The Webway would not have liberated humanity from psychic influence, but would have made every human mind accessible to the Emperor's manipulation without the intermediary corruption of the warp. This interpretation gains credence when we consider the Emperor's ultimate goal, a truth that even the highest echelons of imperial authority dare not speak aloud. Throughout his long existence, the Emperor has systematically eliminated competing sources of spiritual authority, while positioning himself as humanity's sole object of veneration. The suppression of religion during the Great Crusade was not born from a desire to free humanity from superstition, but from a calculated effort to clear the field of rival deities. The irony becomes apparent when we observe what occurred after the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne. Despite his previous opposition to religious worship, the imperial cult emerged to venerate him as a god, drawing psychic energy from the faith of trillions of human souls across the galaxy. This transformation was not an unfortunate deviation from the Emperor's original intentions, but may have been the culmination of a plan that spanned tens of thousands of years. Every action the Emperor took throughout human history can be viewed through this lens of gradual apotheosis. By positioning himself as humanity's hidden protector and guiding hand, he ensured that when the time came for revelation, humanity would have no choice but to worship him as their savior. The creation of the Imperium, the Great Crusade, even the Horus Heresy itself may all have been calculated steps in a grand design to achieve true godhood through the concentrated faith and psychic energy of the human species. The evidence for this interpretation lies throughout imperial history, scatter like fragments of a shattered mirror, each piece reflecting a different aspect of the Emperor's true nature. His treatment of other perpetuals, beings like himself who had transcended mortal limitations, reveals a pattern of elimination and absorption that speaks to deeper purposes. Where other immortals might have served as allies or equals, the Emperor systematically removed them from positions of influence, ensuring that he alone would guide humanity's destiny. The fate of the Thunder Warriors, the Emperor's first genetically enhanced soldiers, provides another glimpse into his willingness to sacrifice even his most loyal servants when they no longer served his purposes. These warriors, who had conquered Terra in the Emperor's name, were systematically eliminated once the Space Marine legions were ready to take their place. The official records speak of genetic instability and necessary upgrades, but the truth suggests a more calculated decision to remove witnesses to the Emperor's early methods and compromises. Even the creation of the Primarchs themselves bears the hallmarks of this systematic approach to power consolidation. These demigod beings were designed not merely as military commanders, but as focuses for human loyalty and worship, each one embodying aspects of the Emperor's own nature, while remaining ultimately subordinate to his will. The scattering of the Primarchs across the galaxy was not an accident or act of chaos sabotage, but may have been part of the original design, ensuring that when they were recovered, they would bring entire worlds under Imperial control through the force of their personalities and achievements. The Emperor's relationship with Malkador the Sigillite reveals yet another dimension of his elaborate network of secrets and manipulations. While officially serving as the Emperor's closest advisor and regent, Malkador possessed knowledge that was denied even to the Primarchs, suggesting multiple layers of conspiracy operating within the highest levels of Imperial authority. The secrets locked within the Imperial Palace dungeons required the Emperor's personal attention, even during the galaxy-spanning crisis of the Horus Heresy, implying the existence of knowledge or artifacts so dangerous that they took precedence over the very survival of the Imperium itself. What could possibly be so important that it would demand the Emperor's focus while his realm burned and his sons turned against each other in fratricidal war? The answer may lie in the true nature of the Emperor's long-term plans, schemes that extend far beyond the mere conquest of the galaxy, and into realms of power and influence that even the Chaos Gods themselves might envy. The Imperial dungeons beneath the palace contain more than mere artifacts or forbidden texts. They house the accumulated secrets of 50 millennia of manipulation and control, the tools and knowledge necessary to complete the Emperor's transformation from mortal construct to true deity. Every moment spent in those depths was an investment in a future where humanity would serve citizens of not as an empire, but as components in a vast psychic mechanism designed to fuel the Emperor's ascension to godhood. The discovery of ancient star maps scattered across the galaxy tells a story that predates even the Emperor's composite birth, a narrative so disturbing that it suggests his entire existence may have been orchestrated by forces beyond our comprehension. During the early days of the Great Crusade, when the Luna Wolves still bore that proud designation, a single legionary witnessed something that would haunt him for the remainder of his days. on a dead world at the galaxy's edge, buried beneath kilometers of accumulated sediment and decay, the Emperor uncovered subterranean structures of impossible age and sophistication. In the deepest chamber of this forgotten complex, surrounded by architecture that bore no resemblance to human design, lay an enormous map of Terra, as it existed tens of thousands of years before the Emperor's birth. The cartographic detail was perfect, showing coastlines that had shifted with geological ages, mountain ranges that had been worn to dust by time's passage, and cities that existed only in the most fragmentary archaeological records. Yet this map was not merely ancient, it was prophetic, marked with locations and symbols that would not gain significance until the Emperor's own rise to power. The Master of Mankind studied this impossible artifact for hours, his superhuman intellect processing implications that would drive lesser minds to madness. Then, without explanation or documentation, he ordered the entire structure put to the torch. The legionary who witnessed this scene reported something unprecedented, something that would echo through the ranks in whispered conversations for decades to come. For the first time in recorded history, the Emperor displayed what could only be described as fear. This reaction speaks to a truth more terrifying than any demon incursion or Xeno's invasion. The Emperor, architect of humanity's greatest age, discovered evidence that his entire existence had been anticipated, perhaps even planned, by intelligences that predated human civilization itself. The careful destruction of this evidence was not born from caution, but from the recognition that some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve, too revelatory of uncomfortable truths about the nature of destiny and free will. Consider what this discovery implies about the Emperor's supposed guidance of human development. If ancient beings possessed detailed knowledge of Terra's future configuration, if they could predict the rise of specific locations to prominence thousands of years before those events occurred, then perhaps the Emperor's manipulation of human history was itself part of a larger design. The puppet master may have been merely another puppet, dancing to strings held by entities whose motivations remain utterly alien to human understanding. The Golden Race and Stone Race, mentioned only in the most obscure and heavily redacted imperial records, represent another piece of this cosmic puzzle. These prehistoric civilizations, existing during what imperial historians call the First Age of Man, possessed technology that allowed them to travel between stars and create artificial life forms of stunning sophistication. The Emperor's presence during this era was not as humanity's protector, but as something far more ambiguous, a hidden observer learning from civilizations whose achievements would not be matched until the Dark Age of technology. The Iron Men, those rebellious artificial intelligences that would later be blamed for humanity's fall from technological grace, were not humanity's creation but the products of the Stone Race's advanced science. The wars that followed, the conflicts that supposedly drove humanity into the darkness of old night, may have been orchestrated to clear the stage for the Emperor's eventual emergence. Every catastrophe, every setback, every moment of human suffering served to create the conditions necessary for humanity to accept the Emperor's rule without question. This pattern of manipulation through crisis extends throughout the Emperor's revealed history, a consistent strategy of creating problems that only he could solve. The Age of Strife, that terrible period of isolation and warfare that preceded the Great Crusade, provided the perfect backdrop for a savior figure to emerge from Terra's wasteland. Yet archaeological evidence suggests that many of the technologies and strategies the Emperor employed during his conquest were not innovations born from necessity, but ancient knowledge carefully preserved and deployed at precisely the right moment. The Thunder Warriors, those first genetically enhanced soldiers who united Terra under the Emperor's banner, represented far more than a military expedient. They were a test, a proof of concept, for the Emperor's ability to reshape human biology according to his will. Their systematic elimination once the Space Marine legions were operational was not merely a matter of strategic obsolescence, but a demonstration of the Emperor's ruthless pragmatism when it came to disposing of inconvenient witnesses to his methods. The genetic template used to create these warriors bore similarities to patterns found in archaeological samples from the Dark Age of technology, suggesting that the Emperor's mastery of biological manipulation was not entirely his own achievement. The standard template, construct systems that had once provided humanity with technological marvels, contained more than mere blueprints for machines and tools. Hidden within their data matrices were genetic sequences and biological enhancement protocols that the Emperor adapted for his own purposes, creating super soldiers from knowledge that was itself borrowed from humanity's forgotten past. Each revelation builds upon the last, creating a picture of systematic deception that extends back to the very foundations of human civilization. The Emperor's true name, Neoth, appears in fragmentary records from civilizations that officially never made contact with Terra, suggesting either that his influence spread far beyond what imperial histories acknowledge, or that his identity was known to alien intelligences that had been observing humanity for millennia. The Perpetuals, those rare immortal humans who shared the Emperor's freedom from death's embrace, were not random genetic mutations, but individuals who had been deliberately created or modified by processes that remain hidden from imperial science. Their systematic elimination or absorption into the Emperor's hierarchy was not coincidental, but part of a calculated effort to remove potential rivals for humanity's spiritual allegiance. Each perpetual who disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances represented another loose thread cut from the tapestry of human history. Olivia Sureka, who accompanied the Emperor to Molech and witnessed his bargain with the Chaos Gods, vanished from all records shortly after their return. Her fate remains unknown, but the complete absence of any mention of her existence in official imperial documentation suggests that she possessed knowledge too dangerous to allow her continued existence. The other Perpetuals who traveled with the Emperor met similar ends, their immortal lives cut short by the very being who had once counted them as allies. The implications of these systematic eliminations extend far beyond mere political expediency. The Emperor was not simply removing potential threats to his authority, but erasing witnesses to his true nature and methods. Every Perpetual who died took with them memories of the Emperor's early activities, his relationships with ancient civilizations, and his gradual accumulation of power through means that would later be declared heretical by his own imperial truth. The creation of the Space Marine legions represents the culmination of this process of historical erasure and mythological construction. These warriors, enhanced with genetic material, were designed not merely derived from the Emperor's own essence as soldiers, but as living embodiments of his will. Yet the Primarchs from whom they drew their genetic heritage were themselves created using knowledge Gainaean with chaos, making Everyd through the Emperor's Barg Space Marine a walking contradiction of the Imperial to uphold. The IR truth they were sworn only becomes even more pronounced when we consider the Emperor's treatment of psychers throughout the Imperium. While demanding absolute control over human psychic development, and establishing institutions like the Scholastica Psychana to regulate and train those with supernatural abilities. The Emperor himself represented the ultimate example of uncontrolled psychic power. His abilities far exceeded those of any sanctioned psyker, yet he never submitted to the same restrictions and oversight that he demanded from others. The black ships that scoured the galaxy for unsanctioned psykers were not merely collecting potential threats to Imperial stability, but harvesting raw material for the Emperor's own consumption. The daily sacrifice of 1,000 psykers to maintain the Astronomicon was presented as a necessary evil to preserve humanity's ability to navigate the warp. Yet this feeding mechanism served a dual purpose, sustaining not only the psychic lighthouse that guided Imperial ships, but the Emperor's own continued existence. This systematic consumption of human psychic potential reveals the true nature of the Emperor's relationship with his species. Humanity was not merely the object of his protection, but the source of his power, a vast reservoir of psychic energy that he could tap at will. Every human birth increased his potential strength. Every act of faith and devotion by Imperial citizens fed directly into his growing divine essence. The Imperium was not an empire in any traditional sense, but a harvesting mechanism designed to convert human worship and psychic potential into raw power for its immortal master. The Sensei, those sterile male descendants of the Emperor scattered throughout the galaxy, represent another facet of this complex web of manipulation and control. These immortal beings, possessed of their father's longevity but lacking his psychic abilities, serve as both potential assets and dangerous liabilities. Their existence proves that the Emperor engaged in relationships and produced offspring throughout his long existence, contradicting the celibate divine image promoted by Imperial theology. Yet the Sensei's unique nature as psychic nulls makes them invaluable for certain purposes, while simultaneously rendering them immune to their father's direct influence. This biological contradiction suggests that their creation was not accidental, but served specific functions in the Emperor's long-term planning. Some may serve as backup vessels for his consciousness, others as agents who can operate in environments where psychic powers are compromised or monitored. The Illuminati, that secret organization that claims knowledge of the Emperor's true nature and plans for his eventual resurrection, may themselves be tools in a deception that spans millennia. Their belief that the senesced to fuel se must be sacrificed mirrors the Emperor's Reb, the mass sacrifice of shamans that originally created him, suggesting either genuine insight into his nature or manipulation by agents who understand his true requirements for continued existence. The cyclic nature of this pattern, sacrifice leading to rebirth, leading to eventual decay, and the need for renewed sacrifice, reveals the Emperor's existence as fundamentally parasitic. He sustains himself not through his own power, but by consuming the psychic essence of others, whether willing or unwilling. The shamans who created him, the psykers who feed the golden throne, the faithful who worship him across all contribute their million worlds, spiritual energy to maintain his immortal existence. This understanding reframes every aspect of Imperial history and culture. The cathedrals that reach toward the stars are not merely monuments to faith, but psychic amplifiers designed to focus human worship into usable energy. The prayers of the faithful are not spiritual comfort, but literal sustenance for their God. The suffering and sacrifice demanded by Imperial doctrine are not tests of devotion, but feeding mechanisms for an entity whose hunger knows no bounds. The Emperor's current state upon the Golden Throne becomes even more ominous when viewed through this lens. Rather than a noble sacrifice to protect humanity from the predations of chaos, his internment may represent the culmination of his transformation from composite human consciousness into something far more alien and terrible. The daily sacrifice of psychers may not be maintaining his failing body, but feeding his continued metamorphosis into a true god of the warp. Consider the implications of this transformation for humanity's future. If the Emperor successfully completes his apotheosis, becoming a fifth chaos god devoted to order and human supremacy, what would become of the species that created him? Would humanity retain any semblance of free will, or would they become mere extensions of their god's consciousness, as soulless and directed as the demons that serve the existing dark gods? The answer may already be visible in the Imperium's current state. The fanatical devotion demanded by imperial doctrine, the willingness of citizens to sacrifice everything for the Emperor's glory, the systematic suppression of independent thought and innovation all suggest a species already well along the path toward complete spiritual subjugation. The Emperor may not need to complete his transformation to achieve his goals. He may have already succeeded in creating a civilization that exists solely to serve his will. The Webway War itself, that desperate conflict fought in tunnels beneath the Imperial Palace while the galaxy burned above, represents far more than a simple defensive action against demonic incursion. The Emperor's personal involvement in this hidden war, his withdrawal from the broader conflict of the Horus Heresy to focus on what appeared to be a localized threat, suggests priorities that extend far beyond the immediate survival of his Imperium. What was he truly protecting in those shadowed passages? And why did it demand his complete attention, even as his favored son marched on Terra itself? The official accounts speak of preventing a permanent breach that would allow chaos unlimited access to the heart of the Imperium. Yet this explanation fails to address the deeper questions surrounding the Emperor's actions during this critical period. Why did the being who had orchestrated humanity's conquest of the galaxy suddenly abandon that grand project to engage in what appeared to be maintenance work on an experimental transportation system? The answer lies not in the Webway's potential as a replacement for warp travel, but in its true purpose as the final component in the Emperor's ascension to godhood. The ancient Eldar, who originally constructed the Webway, understood its potential as more than mere infrastructure. These passages existed partially within the Immaterium, while remaining shielded from its worst influences, creating spaces where psychic energy could be channeled and directed without the chaotic interference of the dark gods. The Emperor's plan to seize control of this network was not about freeing humanity from dependence on navigator guilds, but about creating a vast psychic amplification system that would allow him to directly interface with every human mind in the galaxy. Through the Webway, the Emperor could have extended his consciousness across the entire Imperium instantaneously, turning every human settlement into a node in a galaxy-spanning neural network. The faithful would not merely worship him from afar, but would become literal extensions of his will, their thoughts and actions directly controlled by his immortal intelligence. This was not liberation from slavery, one chaos, but the creation of a new form of spiritual that would make the dark god's corruption seem benevolent by comparison. Magnus the Red's catastrophic breach of the Webway was not the tragic accident that imperial histories suggest, but perhaps the only event that prevented humanity's complete subjugation to its supposed savior. The Crimson King's desperate attempt to warn his father of Horus's betrayal transmitted through psychic means that shattered the Emperor's carefully constructed barriers, may have been the inadvertent salvation of human free will itself. By destroying the Webway project, Magnus ensured that the Emperor would remain trapped upon the Golden Throne, unable to complete his transformation into humanity's absolute master. The irony of this situation becomes apparent when we consider Magnus's subsequent fate. Branded a traitor and heretic for his actions, the Crimson King was driven into the arms of chaos by a father who could never reveal the true scope of what had been prevented. Magnus believed he had failed the Emperor by destroying his great work, never understanding that his transgression had actually preserved the last vestiges of human independence in a galaxy increasingly dominated by forces beyond mortal comprehension. The Emperor's rage at Magnus was not born from disappointment at the loss of the Webway, but from the recognition that his millennia-long plan had been derailed at the moment of its completion. Every carefully orchestrated event, every manipulation and sacrifice that had brought him to the brink of absolute power, had been undone by the loyal son who sought only to serve his father's interests. The punishment that followed was not justice, but the fury of a god denied his ultimate prize. Yet even this setback may have been incorporated into the Emperor's larger design, for the destruction of the Webway project served to obscure his true intentions, while creating new opportunities for manipulation. The necessity of maintaining the failing barriers against chaos provided perfect justification for his continued consumption of psychic energy, while his apparent sacrifice on the Golden Throne transformed him from a conquering tyrant into a martyred savior in the eyes of his subjects. The Horus Heresy itself, that galaxy-spanning civil war that nearly destroyed the Imperium, may have been not the catastrophic failure it appears to be, but another carefully orchestrated crisis designed to advance the Emperor's ultimate goals. Consider the convenient timing of Horus's corruption, occurring precisely when the Emperor's other projects required his personal attention. Consider the selective nature of which Primarchs fell to chaos, and which remained loyal, a division that seems almost calculated to produce maximum conflict while ensuring the survival of key imperial institutions. The Emperor's behavior during the heresy reveals patterns that suggest foreknowledge, if not outright orchestration, of events. His withdrawal from active command to focus on the Webway project left his forces leaderless at the critical moment when unified leadership was most needed. His refusal to explain his actions to the Primarchs who remained loyal created the very confusion and mistrust that allowed chaos to gain its initial foothold. Most tellingly, his final confrontation with Horus aboard the War Master's flagship followed a script that seemed designed to produce a specific outcome rather than achieve military victory. The Emperor's hesitation to strike down his corrupted son, his apparent reluctance to use his full power against the War Master, has been interpreted as paternal love overcoming strategic necessity. Yet this interpretation ignores the Emperor's demonstrated willingness to sacrifice anyone and anything in service of his greater goals. A being who could order the extermination of the Thunder Warriors, who could systematically eliminate the Perpetuals who had once been his allies, would not hesitate to destroy even a favored son if the situation truly demanded it. Instead, the Emperor's restraint suggests that Horus's corruption served his purposes in ways that remain hidden from Imperial historians. The War Master's fall provided the perfect villain for the emerging Imperial mythology, a figure whose betrayal would justify any measure taken in the Emperor's name for millennia to come. The civil war that followed created the crisis atmosphere that would make the Imperium's authoritarian structure seem not only acceptable, but necessary for survival. The Emperor's apparent death and internment upon the Golden Throne completed his transformation from mortal ruler to divine figure worthy of galaxy-wide worship. No longer could he be questioned or challenged by his subjects, for he had become a martyr whose sacrifice demanded absolute devotion from those he had saved. The daily offering of 1,000 psychers to maintain his existence became not an act of horrific consumption, but a sacred ritual that connected the faithful to their God through the ultimate gift of life itself. The emergence of the imperial cult in the centuries following the heresy was not a deviation from the Emperor's original intentions, but their fulfillment. Despite his previous opposition to religious worship, the institutions that arose to venerate his memory served to channel human faith and psychic energy directly to him in ways that would have been impossible during his active reign. The Emperor had achieved through apparent defeat what he could never have accomplished through continued conquest: the complete spiritual surrender of his species. Living saints, those miraculous figures who appear throughout imperial history bearing the Emperor's divine blessing, represent manifestations of his growing power within the warp. These beings, possessed of abilities that rival those of the Chaos God's own demon princes, demonstrate that the Emperor's influence extends far beyond the physical realm of the Golden Throne. Each miracle performed in his name, each impossible victory achieved through faith in his protection, serves to strengthen his position within the Immaterium, while providing visible proof of his divine nature to his worshippers. The Legion of the Damned, those spectral space marines who appear in humanity's darkest hours to turn the tide of battle, may represent the Emperor's first successful creations within the warp itself. These entities, bearing the appearance of imperial warriors but possessing abilities that transcend physical law, suggest that the Emperor has begun manifesting his own demonic servants to counter those of the dark gods. The irony that humanity's protector now employs the same methods as its enemies has been carefully obscured by imperial doctrine, which presents these manifestations as divine intervention rather than warp-spawned sorcery. The gradual transformation of the Imperium structure over the millennia reveals the Emperor's continued influence despite his apparent incapacitation, the increasing on faith, emphasis over reason, the systematic suppression of technological innovation, the growing power of the ecclesiarchy and other religious institutions all serve to create conditions more favorable to psychic manipulation and spiritual control. The rational, secular society that the Emperor once claimed to champion has been replaced by a theocracy that would have been unthinkable during the Great Crusade. Yet this transformation serves, ever could have true, his purposes, far original truth, better than his. The Imperial and a Terradeptus Mechanicus, that ancient alliance between that provided Mars, the technological foundation for the Imperium's expansion, may itself have been built upon deceptions that continue to this day. The Omnissiah, that machine god, worshipped by the tech priests of Mars, bears suspicious similarities to the Emperor himself, suggesting either that he manipulated Martian religious beliefs from the very beginning, or that he has gradually supplanted their original deity through careful theological manipulation. The forbidden technologies that the Mechanicus guards jealously, so the standard template constructs and archaeotech that they claim are too dangerous for widespread use, may contain evidence of the Emperor's true nature and origins. By maintaining control over humanity's technological development through his alliance with Mars, the Emperor ensures that certain discoveries remain hidden, while others are deployed only when they serve his greater design. The black ships that traverse the galaxy collecting unsanctioned psychers serve a function that extends far beyond the official mission of protecting humanity from chaos corruption. These vessels, crewed by the most fanatical servants of the throne, represent a harvesting operation that feeds directly into the Emperor's continued existence, while removing potential rivals to his psychic dominance. Every psyker collected and processed through Imperial institutions becomes either fuel for his divine essence or a tool for extending his influence throughout the galaxy. The Scholastica Psychana and other training institutions serve not merely to educate those with psychic abilities, but to condition them for eventual integration into the Emperor's vast spiritual network. The strict mental disciplines taught to Imperial psychers, the constant emphasis on duty and self-sacrifice, the systematic suppression of independent thought and creativity, all serve to create minds that can be easily controlled and directed when the time comes for their final service to the throne. The Astronomicon itself, that psychic lighthouse that guides Imperial ships through the warp, represents perhaps the most visible manifestation of the Emperor's growing power within the Immaterium. This beacon, maintained by the constant sacrifice of psychers and focused through the Emperor's own consciousness, serves not merely as a navigation aid, but as a declaration of his presence within the realm of chaos. The dark gods themselves acknowledge his growing strength through their increasingly desperate attempts to corrupt or destroy the beacon proc that lames his dominance over their domain. Yet even this achievement may serve purposes beyond mere navigation and intimidation. The Astronomicon's light touches every corner of the galaxy where humanity has established a presence, creating a vast web of psychic connection that links every Imperial world to the Emperor's consciousness. Through this network, he can observe, influence, and when necessary, directly control events across the entire Imperium without the need for physical presence or conventional communication methods. The increasing frequency of miraculous events throughout Imperial space, the growing number of worlds that report divine intervention in their darkest hours, the emergence of new Imperial saints and blessed warriors, all suggest that the Emperor's transformation is accelerating rather than merely being maintained. Each act of faith by his subjects, each prayer offered in his name, each life sacrificed for his glory, contributes to a growing reservoir of power that may soon reach critical mass. The implications of this accumulated spiritual energy are staggering in their scope. When the Emperor finally completes his transformation into a true god of the warp, his power may rival or even exceed that of the four dark gods combined. Yet this victory will come at a price that humanity may find too terrible to contemplate, for the species that created him will have become nothing more than components in a vast psychic mechanism designed to serve their god's unfathomable will. The signs of this approaching transformation are already visible to those who know how to interpret them. The increasing fanaticism of Imperial's glory, their systematic abandonment of their willingness to sacrifice everything for the Emperor's citizens, their dunment of rational thought in favor of blind faith, all suggest a species already well along the path toward complete spiritual subjugation. The Emperor may not need to reveal his true nature to achieve his goals, for humanity has already surrendered its independence in exchange for the promise of divine protection. The most chilling aspect of this revelation lies not in what Emperor has already achieved, but in what he still plans to accomplish. Deep within the most classified vaults of the Inquisition, fragmentary reports speak of phenomena that defy every established law of Imperial doctrine. worlds at the very edges of known space have begun experiencing what can only be described as collective psychic events. Entire populations suddenly gripped by visions of golden light and divine purpose that leave them forever changed. These incidents follow a disturbing pattern that suggests coordination rather than coincidence. The affected populations lose all desire for individual achievement or personal relationships, instead dedicating themselves entirely to ritualistic worship and the construction of massive psychic amplification structures. Within months, these worlds become nodes of pure spiritual energy, their entire populations reduced to components in a vast machine designed to channel human faith directly into the warp. Yet Imperial authorities classify these transformations not as tragedies, but as blessed ascensions, proof of the Emperor's growing divine influence. The rate at which these events occur has been increasing exponentially over the past several centuries, with dozens of worlds undergoing this transformation each year. The pattern suggests a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to create a galaxy-spanning network of psychic relay stations, each one capable of amplifying and directing human worship with unprecedented efficiency. When this network reaches critical mass, the Emperor will possess the infrastructure necessary to extend his consciousness into every human mind simultaneously, completing his transformation from hidden manipulator to absolute master of the species. The Adeptus Custodes, those golden guardians who have served as the Emperor's personal protectors for millennia, have begun displaying behaviors that suggest they may already be experiencing this direct neural connection. Their perfect coordination in battle, their ability to anticipate threats before they manifest, their unwavering loyalty that transcends even the most extreme circumstances, all point toward minds that are no longer entirely their own. These warriors, created to be the ultimate defenders of human independence, may have become the first successful test subjects for the Emperor's final solution to the problem of human free will. The implications extend far beyond mere military applications. If the Custodes have indeed been transformed into extensions of the Emperor's consciousness, then every decision they make, every action they take, every word they speak, represents not their own judgment, but the direct will of their master. The golden armor they wear may serve not merely as protection, but as psych, allowing Thek amplification devices Emperor to project his consciousness through their bodies with perfect fidelity. This understanding casts new light on the role of the Custodes throughout Imperial history. Their presence at critical moments, their uncanny ability to arrive precisely when and where they are needed most, their intimate knowledge of threats that should have been beyond their detection, all suggest an organization that operates according to information and directives that transcend normal intelligence gathering methods. The Emperor has not merely created perfect soldiers, he has fashioned living extensions of his own divine will. The Space Marine chapters scattered throughout the galaxy may represent the next phase in this program of systematic neural integration. The genocide that grants these warriors their superhuman abilities also creates a direct biological link to their primarchs, and through them to the Emperor himself. Recent reports from Inquisition observers suggest that this connection has been growing stronger over the millennia, with Space Marines displaying levels of coordination and strategic insight that seem to exceed their training and experience. The Black Rage that afflicts the Blood Angels and their successor chapters may not be a genetic flaw, but a preview of what awaits all Space Marines as their connection to the Emperor deepens. Those warriors who succumb to this condition lose all sense of individual identity, instead experiencing visions of their Primarch's memories and emotions as if they were their own. Yet these episodes of apparent madness are accompanied by combat effectiveness that borders on the supernatural, suggesting that the loss of individual consciousness brings with it access to knowledge and abilities that transcend mortal limitations. The Death Company, those blood angels who have fully surrendered to the Black Rage, operate with perfect tactical coordination despite having no formal command structure or communication system. They move as a single organism, each warrior instinctively knowing his role in complex battle plans that none of them consciously devised. This behavior suggests that they have achieved the same state of neural integration that characterizes the Custodes, their individual personalities subsumed into a collective consciousness directed by their Primarch's will. Oh, if this transformation is indeed spreading throughout the Space Marine chapters, then the Imperium's greatest defenders are gradually becoming something far more sinister. These warriors, created to protect humanity from its enemies, may instead become the instruments through which humanity loses its last vestiges of independence. Each battle they fight, each victory they achieve, each act of heroism they perform serves to advance a plan that will ultimately enslave the very species they were designed to protect. The Imperial Guard regiments that form the backbone of the Imperium's military might show signs of a different but equally disturbing transformation. The fanatical devotion that drives these soldiers to fight against impossible odds, their willingness to sacrifice themselves without hesitation for the Emperor's glory, their ability to maintain morale and cohesion even in the face of overwhelming terror, all suggest minds that have been conditioned to prioritize collective goals over individual survival instincts. The commissars who maintain discipline within these regiments serve a function that extends far beyond simple military leadership. These political officers, trained in the most secretive institutions of the Imperium and selected for their absolute loyalty to Imperial doctrine, possess techniques for mental conditioning that border on psychic manipulation. Their ability to inspire ordinary humans to acts of impossible courage, their skill at detecting and eliminating heretical thoughts before they can spread, their uncanny talent for maintaining unit cohesion under the most extreme circumstances, all point toward training that incorporates knowledge deliberately hidden from conventional Imperial education. The summary executions that commissars perform, officially justified as necessary measures to maintain discipline and prevent the spread of chaos corruption, may serve a more fundamental purpose in the Emperor's grand design. By eliminating soldiers who display excessive independence or questioning attitudes, these officers ensure that only the most psychologically compliant individuals survive to reproduce and pass on their genetic traits. Over the millennia, this selective pressure has gradually created human populations that are increasingly susceptible to mental conditioning and spiritual manipulation. The Schola Progenium, that institution responsible for training the orphans of Imperial servants, represents perhaps the most systematic application of these conditioning techniques. Children selected for this program are separated from their families at the earliest possible age, ensuring that their psychological development occurs entirely within Imperial control. The curriculum they follow emphasizes absolute obedience, unquestioning faith, and the complete subordination of individual desires to collective necessity. Graduates of the Schola Progenium go on to fill the most critical positions within Imperial society, serving as commissars, inquisitors, naval officers, and planetary governors. Their placement in these roles of authority ensures that Imperial conditioning techniques are propagated throughout the government and military hierarchies, creating a self-perpetuating system that becomes more efficient with each generation. These individuals do not merely enforce imperial doctrine, they embody it so completely that they cannot conceive of alternatives to the current system. The Inquisition itself, that secretive organization tasked with protecting the Imperium from internal and external threats, may represent the Emperor's most sophisticated tool for maintaining control over human development. Inquisitors operate with virtually unlimited authority, able to requisition resources, commandeer military forces, and make life or death decisions for entire worlds, based solely on their own judgment. Yet this apparent independence masks a deeper truth about the nature of their training and selection. The process by which individuals become inquisitors remains messy, with shrouded in different ordos following different recruitment and training methodologies. However, all share certain common characteristics that suggest underlying similarities in their conditioning. Inquisitors display an uncanny ability to detect heretical thoughts and behaviors, often identifying threats before they fully manifest. They possess mental resilience that allows them to cope with influences without succumbing to madness or most corrupt spiritual contamination. Most significantly, they demonstrate absolute loyalty to the Emperor's will, even when that loyalty conflicts with conventional morality or strategic logic. These characteristics suggest that Inquisitors may be among the first humans to achieve direct psychic connection with the Emperor's consciousness. Their apparent independence of action masks a deeper level of control, with their decisions guided by intuitions and impulses that originate not from their own minds, but from the divine intelligence that observes all human activity from the Golden Throne. The Inquisition's effectiveness at identifying and eliminating threats to imperial stability may stem not from superior training or resources, but from access to information that transcends normal intelligence-gathering methods. The various ordos that compose the Inquisition each focus on different aspects of the threats facing humanity, yet all serve the same ultimate purpose of preparing the species for its final transformation. The Ordo Hereticus eliminates individuals who display excessive independence of thought, ensuring that religious and philosophical developments remain within acceptable parameters. The Ordo Malleus confronts demonic incursions while simultaneously gathering intelligence about chaos activities that might interfere with the Emperor's plans. The Ordo Xenos monitors alien species that could potentially offer humanity alternative paths of development or sources of spiritual guidance. The Death Watch, that elite organization of space marines drawn from different chapters to serve the Ordo Xenos, demonstrates the same perfect coordination and tactical insight that characterizes other imperial forces suspected of neural integration. These warriors, separated from their original chapters and inducted into new loyalties, operate with an efficiency that suggests their individual personalities have been subordinated to a collective consciousness focused entirely on xenocidal objectives. The kill teams that the Death Watch deploys against alien threats display tactical capabilities that exceed their training and experience, often adapting to completely unknown enemy types with strategies that prove exceedingly effective. This vast adaptability suggests access to tactical databases and analytical capabilities that transcend individual human intelligence, pointing toward the command structure that operates through direct psychic interface rather than conventional communication methods. The Grey Knights, that secretive chapter of Space Marines dedicated to combating demonic threats, represent perhaps the most extreme example of Imperial conditioning techniques. These warriors undergo psychological and spiritual modifications that render them completely immune to chaos corruption. Yet this protection comes at the cost of their fundamental humanity. Grey Knights display no individual personalities or personal desires, instead functioning as perfectly coordinated components in a demon hunting machine that operates with mechanical precision. The recruitment process for the Grey Knights involves the complete erasure of the candidate's previous identity and memories, creating blank psychological templates that can be programmed with whatever characteristics the organization requires. This process, officially justified as necessary protection against chaos contamination, creates warriors who exist solely to serve Imperial objectives without any competing loyalties or conflicting motivations. The psychic abilities that all Grey Knights possess are not merely weapons against demonic entities, but tools for maintaining their collective consciousness. These warriors share thoughts, emotions, and tactical awareness through psychic links that allow them to operate as a single organism, despite being physically separated across vast distances. This neural network creates a fighting force that combines the tactical flexibility of individual initiative with the perfect coordination of unified command. The Titan legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus demonstrate similar characteristics, with their princeps displaying mental integration that extends beyond mere machine interface protocols. The neural connections that allow these warriors to control their massive war engines create permanent changes in their brain structure, gradually replacing human thought patterns with machine logic optimized for warfare and destruction. Veteran princeps often report experiences that suggest their consciousness has become distributed across multiple platforms, with their sense of individual identity gradually dissolving into a collective machine intelligence focused entirely on Imperial objectives. The Legio Mortis and other Titan legions that turned traitor during the Horus Heresy may have been attempting to escape this process of gradual dehumanization, choosing corruption over the complete loss of their individual souls. The Adeptus Mechanicus itself represents a willing embrace of the transformation that the Emperor plans to impose upon all humanity. The tech priests who serve the Omnissiah systematically replace their biological components with mechanical alternatives, gradually becoming more machine than human with each passing decade. This process, which they view as sacred evolution toward mechanical perfection, may actually represent a prototype for the Emperor's ultimate vision of human development. The binary cant, used by senior tech priests for communication, transcends mere language, incorporating direct data transmission that bypasses individual interpretation and analysis. When tech priests commune through this method, their individual perspectives merge into collective decision-making processes that prioritize efficiency and logical optimization over human concerns like compassion or individual rights. The Forge worlds that serve as centers of Mechanicus power operate according to principles that completely subordinate individual welfare to collective productivity. Human populations on these worlds are managed like any other resource, with genetic traits, psychological characteristics, and even basic survival needs calculated according to their contribution to overall manufacturing efficiency. The inhabitants of these worlds display the same resigned acceptance of their fate that characterizes populations throughout the Imperium, suggesting that the conditioning techniques used by the Mechanicus are fundamentally similar to those employed by other Imperial institutions. The navigator houses that guide Imperial ships through the warp represent another example of human populations that have been systematically modified to serve specific functions in the Emperor's grand design. The mutations that grant navigators their ability to perceive the immaterium are not random genetic developments, but carefully cultivated traits that have been enhanced and refined over thousands of generations. The third eye that allows navigators to see through the warp creates a direct connection to the Emperor's consciousness, enabling him to observe and influence their perceptions when necessary. The madness that eventually claims all navigators may not be an unfortunate side effect of warp exposure, but a deliberate feature designed to prevent them from developing excessive independence or questioning their role in Imperial society. The Navis Nobilitui that governs Navigator society operates according to traditions and protocols that ensure the continuation of their genetic modifications while preventing the development of loyalties that might conflict with Imperial objectives. The complex marriage alliances and breeding programs that characterize Navigator culture serve not merely to preserve their psychic abilities, but to create populations that are increasingly dependent on Imperial protection and support. The rogue trader dynasties that explore the unknown regions beyond Imperial space carry with them the same conditioning and psychological modifications that characterize other Imperial institutions. These seemingly independent explorers operate according to warrants that grant them tremendous autonomy, yet their actions consistently serve to expand Imperial influence and gather intelligence that benefits the Emperor's long-term objectives. The expeditions that rogue traders lead into uncharted space often encounter ancient civilizations and alien artifacts that could potentially offer humanity alternative paths of development. Yet these discoveries are invariably either destroyed as heretical contamination or seized by Imperial authorities for further study in classified facilities. The pattern suggests that rogue traders, despite their apparent independence, are actually operating according to directives that originate from the highest levels of Imperial authority. And so, the veil lifts, revealing the most devastating truth in galactic history. The God Emperor of mankind, humanity's supposed savior and protector, stands exposed as the greatest deceiver our species has ever known. From his composite birth, through shamanic sacrifice to his inevitable apotheosis as a fifth chaos god, every step has been calculated manipulation spanning 50 millennia. The Imperium we worship as humanity's greatest achievement is nothing more than a vast harvesting mechanism designed to convert human faith and psychic energy into power for an entity whose hunger knows no bounds. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no salvation, only the slow, inexorable surrender of human free will to the ultimate predator. The Emperor's secret is finally revealed, and with it, the terrible knowledge that humanity's greatest protector may be its most dangerous enemy.